gentlemen, the world's greatest wild beast circus welcomes you one and all. We present tonight a feast for your eyes, unsurpassed by any in the empire or without it. The most ferocious of beasts, the most death-defying.
I'll tell you straight, Jimmy, I don't think I can stick this much longer.
How many times have we heard this, Mrs. Rhonda? Hey?
Try not to think about it.
No. But who can put up with that swaggering bully day in, day out?
I can, Leonardo.
Well, you have to. But I'm not his wife.
The fearsomest thing imaginable.
Can't his money buy your loyalty?
No, only our bodies and souls.
But you of all people should ask.
The main-shaking devourer, Dandelion.
That's my cue.
Now, one day soon you'll find you're the only act left on the bill. You know that.
Do you think yourself strong enough to break free of him, Leonardo?
Strong? Oh, yeah, he's the strong man, isn't he?
Yeah.
Maybe one of the animals will do for him first.
Sad thing, though. Strong man's all he is.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Queen of the Night and the King of the Beasts.
The Veiled Lodger by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Dramatized for radio by Roger Danes. With Clive Merrison as Sherlock Holmes and Michael Williams as Dr. John Watson. And featuring Harriet Walter as Eugenia Rhonda and Douglas Henshaw as Leonardo. The Veiled Lodger.
Morning, Mrs. Marilow.
Albert.
What's it to be then this morning? Extra quart? Because I know when you have a lodger in, you want a little drop of milk extra for his tea, don't you? Over and above.
Oh, any excuse to drum up a bit more business, that's you, eh?
No, but you see, if the milk don't get drunk, what then happens to the poor cows? It's a social duty.
Well, it happens I'll have to disappoint them, Albert, and take a quart as usual. Here. Seeing as how my new lodger is so ladylike as to take her tea weak without milk.
I hope you don't start that too as a habit, Mrs. Marilow. Put me out of business, that will.
Albert! But Jack, what is it?
Dear God!
It is indeed a surprising story.
So, in the end, it was me suggested coming to you, Mr. Holmes.
It was well thought of, Mrs. Merrilow. But I wish to make it clear now. I have no intention of coming alone to South Brixton.
Was someone out for your blood, sir? Some criminal murderer?
No. You've been perhaps too much influenced by sensation of the kind with which my friend Watson panders to the public taste.
No, sir. The newspapers.
Oh, the press. I've read only one true statement there in my life, and that was a mistake. Holmes? But someone's found its man, I see. Come in, my dear fellow, and bid good morning to Mrs. Merrilow of South Brixton.
Mrs. Merrilow?
My friend and colleague, Dr. Watson.
Doctor, good day to you, sir.
If you wish to indulge your filthy habits, Watson, Mrs. Merrilow has no objection to tobacco.
No, none at all, Doctor.
Just as well. I could smell the smoke-laden atmosphere from the street.
Oh. Mrs. Merrilow has something of an interesting story to tell.
Well, anything I can do, you know.
You'll understand, madam, that I should prefer to have a witness.
Certainly, if you say so.
And you'll have to
Mr.
make your
Holmes.
lodger understand that before we arrive.
Lord bless you, sir. She's that anxious to see you. You might as well bring the whole parish at your heels, so long as you come.
Good. Well, I should like to go over the facts once more, to be certain we have them correct, and to acquaint Watson here with your peculiarly secretive lodger.
I'm all ears, Mrs. Merrilow.
Well, it's like Mrs. Rhonda said, sir. From the very moment when she first walked through my door.
Privacy, Mrs. Merrilow. That is all I wish for. And I'm more than ready to pay for it.
Well, I trust the situation may prove pleasing, ma'am, set back from the road as we are.
Yes. More private than most. That is how it must be. You have no other lodger?
No, I only ever take the one, ma'am, and I've no family now since my old Matthew passed over.
Your husband?
Widowed now for nigh on 10 years, but it does get easier to put up with the loss, you know.
Does it?
Oh, yes. Well, you'll be private here, ma'am. if you want to be.
I imagine you would like some money in advance,
Well,
Mrs.
that
Merrilow.
would be much appreciated, ma'am. 2 weeks
Let
would
us
just
say
be
a
in
quarter's rent to begin with.
a quarter.
More, if you wish. Though it would not be...
No, a quarter would be very acceptable. But you'll be wanting to see the room before you
I
part
can
with
tell
money.
what it will be without seeing it. That it be private is my only wish.
Well, if you say so, ma'am.
Now, £1, 2, 3.
She counted out the quarter there and then. Hard cash, never known it of a lodger.
If only all accounts were so promptly settled. But, Mrs. Merrilow, you've omitted to give Watson here the most salient fact pertaining to your lodger.
Oh, so I didn't. And yet it's such a strange thing, I'm amazed I let my tongue run off in another direction, so to speak.
Your story is already most intriguing, Mrs.
Stop
Merrilow.
The fact of the matter is, this lady, Mrs. Rhonda, never raises her veil.
Never? Not even in her own room?
The truth is, Watson, the veiled lady has lodged these 7 years in Mrs. Merrilow's house without her landlady ever having seen her face until a few days ago.
And I wish to Hanover, gentlemen, that I'd never seen her face at all.
My dear Lord. Poor man. Margate. A week. Inquest. Coroner's verdict. Death by drowning. So he is at peace. And I am.
I just popped up to see if you might have finished with the illustrated. Why, Mrs. Rhonda, what's the matter here? Oh, my great goodness. Mrs. Rhonda.
You see it now, Mrs. Merrilow, and know at last why it is that I never raise my veil.
Her features, I understand, were most terribly mutilated.
Well, now, Mr. Holmes and Doctor, which you'd hardly say she has a face at all. That's how it looked. Now, a milkman got a sight of it once. Milk all over the front garden. That's the kind of face it is.
What a horrible thing for a woman. Do you know how it happened?
She never said. I didn't like to ask.
In fact, Mrs. Merrilow, you know nothing about her history.
Well, you can understand how she might not wish to speak of it.
Yes, indeed. But you could have gathered some notion of her from her references when she came.
Well, she didn't present any.
Oh, surely it's usual.
She paid a quarter's rent, sir, right down on the table in advance, and in these times it's a richer woman than me can afford to turn that
And she
down.
never showed you her face, from first to last.
Except on that one accidental occasion.
That's what I say, gentlemen.
A most remarkable story.
I'm not surprised you should want Mr. Holmes to examine the business.
No, don't, sir.
But then why
If
did
it
you
was
come-
for me, I'd have left well alone, and that's the truth. So long as I get my rent, which I do, I'm more than satisfied. Oh, you couldn't have a quieter lodger than Mrs. Rhonda, nor one who causes less trouble.
And something else has brought matters to a head?
Who's there? Oh, my sweet gracious! Mrs. Rhonda! Mrs. Rhonda! A nightmare, was it? Here, I put some honey in.
Thank you.
Oh, look at you, Mum. You've hardly ate these last 3 weeks. And last night you were crying out again. Fair ringing through the house. Sent the shivers through me, I can tell you.
I'm sorry.
You're wasting away. Well, you've forgotten to stir it. Oh, now, Mrs. Rhonda, it's my guess you have something that's troubling your soul. Well, there's the clergy for that.
Oh.
And if not them, there's the police.
For God's sake, Mrs. Merrilow, not the police.
Well, I should say between the one and the other, you should be able to get some help, some peace.
Not the police. And the clergy can't change what is past.
Well, then, I don't know what's to be done for you, I'm sure.
Nothing, perhaps. Yet I've lived 7 years with my dead secret. Long enough. It would ease my mind now if someone could only learn the truth. before I die.
And then, well, says I, if you won't have the regulars, there is this detective man we read about, begging your pardon, Mr. Holmes.
Not at all.
And Mrs. Rhonda, she fair jumps at it. That's the man, says she. Bring him here, Mrs. Merrylow, bring him here at once. And just in case you wasn't inclined to come, she said I should give you this.
Abbas Parva.
Does that mean anything to you?
Give him that name, she says, and tell him too that I am the wife of Rhonda's wild beast show. If he's the man I think he is, that will bring him.
And it will, too. We shall come early in the afternoon, Mrs. Merrylow, after I've had a little chat with Dr. Watson.
And lunch, I hope.
We shall say about 3 o'clock, then, at your house.
Well, until then, gentlemen.
Allow me, Mrs. Merrylow.
Oh, Lord bless you, sir. I'm a landlady, me. I don't need seen out by a doctor. Thanking you all the same.
Until this afternoon, then.
I expect so, gentlemen. Yes.
Very good, Watson. Very good. I shall need A, R, and C from the year 88. And you could usefully dismember the cold partridge you'll find upon the sideboard.
Shall I pour this as well?
Yes, what is it?
Montrachet. Doesn't really go with
Yes,
James.
let's pour away, whatever you think, my dear fellow. Now, Abbas Parva. Have you no recollection of that?
No, none.
Yes, yet you were with me then. Oh, here we are, yes. November of 88. My notes here in the margin, you see, yes. Yes, I remember the case worried me at the time. But I could make nothing of the tragedy beyond a conviction that the coroner's verdict was mistaken.
Perhaps, Holmes, you could give me the facts.
My impression was really very superficial. None of the parties had engaged my services. What were you doing then?
November of 88? Might it have been that Japanese business? The politician and the lighthouse?
And the train cormorant, yes, of course. But you must have heard of Barrington Rhonda. His circus was a household word.
Yeah, certainly. It used to be said he rivaled even Wombwell and Sanger.
In this day, Watson, Rhonda was accounted one of the greatest showmen in the empire. By the time of the Abbas Parva tragedy, both he and his world's greatest wild beast circus were on the downgrade.
Debt.
Drink. I'll say it was claimed in evidence.
They are a low lot as a whole, these show people. Wasn't it Rhonda's troupe which fought the great pitched battle with Raphael's travelling theatre company?
By most accounts, it was typical of the man. Though unusually, Rhonda's caravan came off the worse on that occasion.
I recall they had to flee the field.
A mob of actors came close to letting out his greatest wild beasts from their cages.
The Battle of Wimbledon Common, they called it.
Well, it was to Wimbledon Rhonda was bound again that November of 88, when his caravan halted at a small Berkshire village.
Abbas Parva,
We were camping there just the one night, Your Honour.
You had no permission to exhibit, is that correct?
Well, what would have been the point in asking? I mean, the place is that small, we'd have lost sixpence for every penny we took. Even if we'd been allowed to show, which isn't likely.
Your permission to rest the night was conditional upon your seemly behaviour, is that so?
We're working folk, sir. We're not a band of tinkers.
Nevertheless, you have been responsible for a most regrettable uproar.
Well, no, sir. We work hard on the road and in our shows. And acrobats and clowns labour just as hard as strong men like me. Though there's plenty who don't, or won't, believe it.
Do you number Mr. Rhonda among those people?
Well, he knew well the value of every beast and man in that circus, sir.
Now, you mention the beast, Mr. Leonardo. The lion.
The most magnificent and fearsome creature in captivity, ladies and gentlemen. See their teeth? 100 a meat a week they tear apart, and never a visit to any dentist, madam. Imagine that. See them paws, claws, as long as this, madam. You scratch his back, and he'll scratch yours. And how? But even the king of beasts can be subdued by beauty.